Hello, everybody. This is Hyun Park coming to you from Amalgam Insights, and welcome to TEM Expo Webinar number 5. Today, we're going to be talking about infrastructure as a service, the mixed blessings of overwhelming detail. You know, this is an interesting area to try to figure out because when I started getting into cloud infrastructure as a service about 5 years ago, I started getting requests from clients asking, how do I start managing, back then, really just Amazon Web Services. And it was a big problem because first of all, when I first got into this, frankly, I didn't have cloud experience. My background is more in telecom, network, mobility. And as I started digging into these bills and started learning more about these services, I found that there's an extreme amount of detail. So I've actually had to cut a lot of stuff out of this presentation that I normally provide, and hopefully you'll be able to get the gist of it. But if there are any aspects that you feel aren't fleshed out enough for you to get to, please contact me afterwards. I'm just at Hyun@amalgaminsights.com, H-Y-O-U-N. So you may have noticed there's a sponsor here. So, I have a couple of updates first about the TEM Expo that we're going to be holding this summer. All of these webinars are leading up to this virtual event that we'll be holding later this year. First of all, thank you to our first sponsor, our foundation sponsor, MobiCord, who will be supporting our TEM Expo. We're very excited about that. Frankly, as we get more sponsors, we'll be able to bring out more gifts and offerings to our attendees. So that's part of what gets me excited about that part. Second of all, we've actually had to move the TEM Expo date. The new date is July 14th. Funny thing is, I had pushed for a June date. Originally, we are at June 11th. But apparently when you're competing against IBM and SAP and every event company in the world and every healthcare company and every other company that does any sort of virtual event, it gets really hard to support all those events. Basically, every virtual event platform company I've talked to says that their traffic has gone up 300%. They have blocked off June, have blocked off most of July. Most of them aren't taking business before August at this point. So just an interesting side note from this quarantine life that we're all living. With that little aside, just a reminder as to why we're doing this TEM Expo as well. From my perspective, the real issue here is that we are in a recessionary environment. GDP dropped about 5% in the first quarter of 2020. And frankly, there are opportunities here to cut IT costs and to keep the company healthier, to be able to maintain jobs and to maintain financial security, maintain cash flow at a time when it's really difficult. We just happen to live in a world where our IT department has opportunities for optimization if cleaned up correctly. Frankly, though, we also have the opportunity to really mess up our technical environments and hamper our company's ability to ever grow again if we do this wrong. So there's a very subtle balance that needs to be put there, and it requires expertise, frankly. You can't just get a contract person or some accountant to just slash 40% just because they want to. So we're going to talk about the right way to start looking for cost savings here in our cloud environment today. So first of all, what are we really thinking about from a cloud perspective? Cloud infrastructure as a service is frustrating from my perspective for 3 key reasons. On the left, you see massive growth, unlike any other IT spend. If you ask any IT analyst, me or Gartner or Forrester or IDC, about the size of IT at this point, we're all pretty much saying that software is going to be flat, with SaaS growing and on-prem software licenses declining this year. All other IT spend is going to decline this year. Cloud infrastructure as a service, probably still going to grow about 30%. It's recession-proof right now. And actually, it's the only way to be able to support a lot of the computing that we do. So we're going to be seeing 30% growth likely, even in a recession. And the flip side of this is that there's kind of this IT rule of 30 that exists, that any unmanaged IT area typically has about 30% of slack that exists because it has just grown over time. So what you're going to see ideally in cloud infrastructure as a service, if it's done right this year, you're going to grow 30% because of all the cloud computing you have to do. But if you haven't been managing it well in the past or just have had it distributed for whatever reason, you'll also be able to drop it 30%, and the net spend should be about even as you increase computing. Of course, if you're already managing it well, you're just going to see an increase in spend. It is what it is. You're already doing a good job, and nobody ever, you're never rewarded for doing a good job. Second, extremely detailed billing. Cloud infrastructure as a service has extremely detailed billing. I thought I understood detailed billing well as somebody with a telco background who used to look at every single call and every single aspect of what happened in the telco environment. And then I found out that in cloud, every single service has the exact same amount of detail, except things can happen much faster. So we're talking about orders of magnitude increases in billing detail. And then on the right, you see a lack of standardization because obviously none of these cloud platforms decided to work with each other. Amazon doesn't care one whit about how successful Microsoft Azure is or Google Cloud Platform. They're all developing their own separate billing structures. There is no Ma Bell in the back that created all of the cloud infrastructure billing in the first place. So that vendor independence. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, an interesting aspect of this that I find also frustrating is that people have a lot of trouble trying to describe what is actually happening here in cloud cost management. I've seen it called cloud cost management, which is the basic answer, cloud financial management, which I think is somewhat misleading because cost is really more of an accounting task. Financial management starts talking about the complexity of finance and talking about treasury and risk and tax and all these things that IT people aren't really talking about, but they don't know what they don't know. So they call it financial management. And also even more confusing, FinOps, which is supposed to stand for financial ops. It's playing off of the DevOps term. But when you think about it, DevOps is about things associated with software development. FinOps isn't related to financial operations, but specifically the finances of cloud. So we're ignoring the rest of finance and calling it FinOps. So it's just a weird thing you should be aware of, that there are several different terms that exist here just for talking about cloud cost management. You're going to see them used interchangeably. I can't change the vendors from saying what they're going to say, but those terms are out there in case you're looking for best practices and just Googling for what to do next. So when we're looking at infrastructure as a service at Amalgam Insights, we kind of see 8 key opportunities for cloud cost management in the near term to be able to optimize what you're doing. Finding a cloud boss, utilization, optimization, governance, tagging, commitments, automation, and then data and application development. So to dig into each one of those a little bit, first of all, identifying a cloud boss. It's right now, we still see that a majority of cloud environments don't have a boss for the business aspects of cloud computing who understand what that actually means. Typically, there will be a technical boss, and that technical boss will try to take on financial aspects, but typically it's not fully aware of how to manage both the accounting aspects and then the planning and financial aspects that exist from a planning and budgeting perspective that roll up to the CFO office. So it's important to have somebody who is able to understand the business aspects of cloud computing and how cloud costs will roll up to the rest of the budget, how it is split up across departments and projects, so on. If you have a chief architect or a technical lead who really does want to learn about the financial and accounting side of this, that's great. My experience is that this is kind of a hybrid role, kind of a weird role. In that regard, this is like telecom expense management, in that the people who do this best are the people who understand both the IT and the finance and accounting and procurement aspects of IT all at the same time. And it means they are, call it a 7 out of 10 at all of these aspects, but they each aspect individually. But because this is a hybrid role, it's more important to be able to understand how all of this fits together. From my experience, regardless of the role that takes place, if it is a controller on the other side, somebody financial, they need to learn IT. There's no two ways about it. This is an interesting hybrid role that is just starting to be developed, and there is no one name for it. Next up, talking about service utilization. So when you think about cloud utilization, you can't just call it one thing. There's really a bunch of buckets that exist. On the top row, I've got here storage, compute, and network, kind of 3 classic cloud areas. And then I think it's important to think about this in terms of looking on the first column here in terms of base, variable utility, and unexpected growth. Because honestly, a lot of this base usage can often actually be supported through on-prem resources that already exist, legacy investments that have been made, servers, data center, etc. I don't think it's necessary to necessarily push steady base utilization computing into the cloud because, frankly, you can probably do a better job from a cost perspective of managing that on-prem. So something to be aware of. But as you start getting into the variable utility use cases and potential of unexpected growth, that's where cloud really starts being more useful. And you can think of, and you should think about that within each of these buckets. So to give an idea of why, one example here is Zoom and Oracle. Zoom recently announced that they are using Oracle as a cloud solution. They got a fair amount of press for it. And of course, it's interesting because Zoom has recently gone from 10 million users per day to hundreds of millions. So obviously they needed to grow. So why did Zoom do this? If you look at the press release, you have this very pablum-y press answer from Eric, who is obviously playing politics. Saying the nice thing. Oracle because of its industry-leading security, performance, and unmatched level of support. But really what it came down to, if you start looking at the numbers, since I look at the finance of this, I care about the money, is that when you look at the pricing, Oracle Cloud's networking cost pricing is far lower than Amazon Web Services. And, going back a couple steps here, when we look at this far right side, networking from a cloud perspective, very important for streaming and real-time services. So if you are very focused on providing those binaries, the streaming, real-time analytics, start looking specifically at the network offerings from a pricing perspective to see what's going on. It's not necessarily just about saying, I have this one cloud and I'm doing this stuff on it. I'm sure that Zoom is continuing to use other clouds for storage, and other clouds for computing as well. They are going to use every cloud and use it correctly, but it's important to understand that you might have significant savings. In this case, from our estimates are probably by going to Oracle, Zoom was able to save 80 to 90% on their networking compared to sticking with good old AWS. There are arbitrage opportunities here. Next, looking at service optimization opportunities. This is just about cutting costs in the short term. You definitely want to be looking at your bill to make sure that you are finding duplicate resources and seeing how they're being used. You want to review idle services. On the right, you want to right-size resources. Obviously, there are all sorts of different buckets that you can purchase resources in and services. You want to have an understanding of how your cloud environment will change as you grow or shrink. Right now, for instance, it would probably be a good idea to have a scenario in your organization for what happens if we double. Do we keep the same types of resources, or do we need to right size to larger buckets, larger resources? Or if we shrink, are there opportunities to be able to change over? That's something you can prepare for. You don't have to just wait until the worst case scenario happens. And then on the bottom right, bottom row, you can also see there are opportunities for discount audits. So you know that you have a discount negotiated, but is that actually coming in place? My experience here is that although cloud bill pricing tends to be pretty accurate, getting onto the invoice, not 100%, but like 99.9. Discounts, less so. Discounts sometimes get left out, so it's a good opportunity to be able to take a look at that. Next, workload times, making sure that you are, if you have an opportunity to turn off workloads at non-peak times or to be able to spread the love, be able to do that from a time perspective. And then expiration dates, just simply seeing what kinds of resources have expiration dates, what don't, and whether that should be the case. Obviously, especially for resources that are being used from a test perspective or development perspective and not going into production, you want to have some sort of expiration date. So next, looking at project governance, this is also a really good time to figure out how you are bringing cloud resources in. So you want to first plan, measure twice, cut once before you are actually bringing in some sort of new resource into being. You want to tag and document all services to make sure that they are actually being tracked and categorized correctly, assign expiration dates and commitments, and then review all of this before production. Once a project is about to go into production, this is a great time to be able to clean up everything that was being used from a test perspective. And that, this needs to be created, this needs to be formalized to a greater extent than it currently is. The number of companies that keep putting out multiple instances of production type workloads and then have that going on in the background because they never turned off their tests is still astonishing to me. So just make sure that you have this cleaned up from a cloud perspective. Next up, looking at tagging. So, coming from an IT accounting and IT expense background, obviously I care about how things are tagged and categorized. And from looking at other environments, these are kind of the tagging areas that I find most useful typically. Cross-charging to general ledger from a cost center or profit center perspective, aligning to projects, aligning to specific owners. Every resource and every service should be assigned to an owner who is active at the company and currently has some sort of technology responsibility. As straightforward as that sounds, it seems to escape a lot of people, so I feel like I need to mention that. Next, looking at service priority, making sure that you know whether these services are being used for production, for tests, for specific unit testing, whatever it might be, knowing what that process or service is being used for. And then finally, looking at region to make sure that you are following obvious cloud governance, risk management, and compliance issues, as each geography has its own issues, and you might be falling prey to issues such as CCPA or GDPR or other data governance issues very easily if you're not keeping track of what regions are being supported with which services. So just keep in mind that this tagging practice, whether you are able to automate some of it by linking to other systems or have to do it manually, it has to get done, because at the end of the day, you want to have this categorized correctly. One of my favorite sayings is this thought that metadata is a love note to the future. I find it very romantic, but at the same time very practical, in that you want to know why things are happening, and you won't understand how things are categorized if you don't have things cleaned up from the beginning. It's a lot harder to do this after the fact than it is to do at the beginning. Next up, contractual commitments. Obviously, this is going to be a big deal over the rest of the year. You want to think about your time commitment. How many years are you committing to the provider? And with the idea that you could get, frankly, better discounts over time or more flexible revenue or usage commitments by going in for a longer amount of time. This might be a good time to be able to settle on a partner if you haven't already done so, at least a primary partner, and perhaps even a secondary partner to have that credible threat as well from a pricing perspective. Second, looking at payment terms, seeing whether you're paying upfront or paying over time for services. This might be a good time to add some flexibility there as well. On the third, looking at potential growth or reduction, this is something where you need to build a number of scenarios based on your expectations of the company, as well as wildcards that may exist. So for instance, if your operations are staying the same, but you're going to be adding something very processor intensive like machine learning workloads, this might be a time to look at how that will potentially affect your pricing, and to make contractual agreements and changes based on that ahead of time. And then on the bottom row, you can see starting with a potential application investment. So obviously, when you are bringing all these contract services into being, they have dependencies on applications, and perhaps you have to also invest in specific application capabilities or services or security to help optimize your cloud, make sure that at least if you have some sort of unfunded mandate, or that some sort of other software dependency is coming into play as a result, that you're aware of it. Be aware of regional concerns, and then be aware of contracted discounts and discounts received, which I talked about earlier. This idea that pricing and discounts can be separated in the billing system, and that even if the price is correct, you may need discounts. You have to check where the discount is actually being provided and whether it's accurate for all services that the discount is supposed to cover. So recommendations for the future. So once you've got all this cleaned up, what I've told you is definitely enough to get through, definitely enough to do for 2020. And those are the things that are going to give you the most immediate value. But moving forward, you also want to think about automation and the reduced total cost of ownership. So why are you doing cloud in the first place? Are you just doing it because you're being told that it's cheaper? Really, the value of cloud is around saving labor, saving effort, and at this time, we are looking for easy to use services and resources. So thinking about setup, administration, business continuity, backups, upgrades, performance tuning. These are the places where we're going to save time by using cloud. And think about that TCO as well when you're looking at whether to use cloud services or not, and which types of cloud services to use. It may be that a more expensive cloud service with better KPIs and better service level agreements may actually be better for you, because the incremental cost of that better service is going to be more valuable than, frankly, the potential investment in an FTE in an area that is focused on administration and very tactical areas. So make your IT investments widely. And then also think about data and application development, because one of the things about cloud is that it's already, a lot of this already priced as a utility service or as a per use service. There's only so much we can do to optimize cloud costs in and of themselves. We have to start looking at both data management in terms of the prepping, quality, cleansing, cataloging, and taking action such as a change data capture, and being able to create more optimized data environments for our cloud, as well as looking at application development, where just things like code size, efficient application building applications on a service-based, microservices-based paradigm to be able to move pieces in and out easily. That's important as well, because we don't have time to deal with these monolithic, bloated platforms if possible. It's much easier to work with individual pieces and to be able to work with a clean environment. So think about those foundational workloads and data that you're putting into the cloud as an additional opportunity to save money over time. And with that, those are the key recommendations I have. Here are a number of recommended vendors that I've been providing to, that I've been bringing up in my inquiries over the last quarter. These aren't all the same, I would say, although each of these vendors has some sort of cloud cost capability. The ways they do it and the environments that they support are quite different. So I wouldn't just use this as a general list without knowing your specific environment and your priorities. I can't say which of these are best for you. This is better set up for a shortlisting exercise or an inquiry than simply a straightforward recommendation. But here are at least a few vendors that you can start with and then cut down to a shorter list that is more appropriate to you. And with that, thank you so much for your time today. I hope this was helpful. I'm hoping that this gives you a starting point to be able to cut your infrastructure as a service costs, because this really is an emerging area where it is quite possible to find 30% savings within cloud environments. That is the average right now. And there's a real opportunity to be used those costs either to increase your digital investment or to be able to, frankly, improve cash flow and save jobs. That's the priority for me, and I hope it is for you as well. With that, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to joining you in the next webinar.